Alan Turner, well, Milton Alan Turner. I prefer Alan, but I go by Milton, Alan. Long story, we'll get into it. Choose whichever you like. And thank you for coming to my session on how to use Facebook to help prepare students for the AP Persuasive Essay. First question, are all of you French teachers or related to German, Italian, or Spanish teachers? The examples I'm showing are in French, but you can share with your colleagues. They could do the same thing. I also teach French and Spanish. I'm encouraging my Spanish colleagues to do similar things this year with the change of the Spanish exam. Since the tasks are the same, the guidelines are exactly the same, so this is applicable to any of the languages. I've hopefully given a little handout. The most important thing about the handout is probably it has my email address and my web page, where I maintain a web page with lots of things on it. And probably the most important thing for following up on this session is if you go to my web page and scroll down to AP French Language and Culture, I have links to many of the internet sites that I'm using, my AP French Facebook group that we'll be seeing later, as well as copies of these presentations. I've added a couple of slides with little changes from what I did in so if there's something that I haven't done over, feel free to go to the website, download it, or email me, ask me questions afterwards. My presentation will have 3.5 parts, really 4 parts, but it's really 3 parts. First, I'll briefly talk a little bit about myself so that you have an idea of why you should not be listening to what I say or why you should just ignore everything that I say. You decide. And then talk a little bit about the why, the what, and the how. So the why, what is it from, particularly from the persuasive essay, and the need to use authentic resources that led me to decide to create a forum where students can practice the speaking, the listening and the writing skills, and the reading skills for the persuasive essay. Then what I have them do in the Facebook group, and largely what they do, one of the things I love about it, they do most of the work. I can sit back and moderate and read, but they're doing a lot of the work. They're finding a lot of the sources, and they're writing and arguing with each other. And then the how you can go and set up your own Facebook group with some considerations, perhaps some news or some notes, or some things you might want to think about or consider. And then at the end, questions about any or all the above. And most of this, I think, is in English, some is in French. I may go back and forth. Feel free to use whichever language you want. But if I go back and forth, that doesn't bother me. I'm going to pick language in which you're most comfortable. So first, a little bit about me. Again, my name is Alan Turner. I teach French and Spanish at St. Ignatius High School. I've been teaching there for 25 years now. I've been teaching AP for about 20 years, and I've been involved with the AP program since 1998, first as a reader, then since 2002 as a table leader, and then since 2009, I've been a question leader, which means that I'm in charge of training the table leaders and choosing the samples that are used, writing some of the descriptions for the benchmarks that we use. Originally, I was for the old writing section, and then since for the new exam for the persuasive essay. So some of this for me was knowing the exam was coming and preparing for it, thinking, how am I going to find all these authentic resources to give my students enough practice to do it? And the good news was I figured out, I don't have to do it, they can do it themselves. And one of the beauties of Facebook about this, they're doing the work, they're finding the articles, they're finding the videos, and they're finding stuff they like. As opposed to me finding something and they go, oh, that's stupid, that sucks. Well, they find it, so they love it. And if they have an interest in it, they're probably going to remember the vocabulary and be more likely to use the structures. For those who were talking about argumentation, les termes que, je pense pas que, using subjunctive, other things, or things they need to support an opinion and talk about compare and contrast. So, first, again, as an overview, I'm going to talk about the AP Language and Culture exam. Assuming most of you probably know quite a bit about this, but I'm going to go briefly over what the task is, some of the resources for it. I've given you all a copy of the grading rubric for the persuasive essay. And then after that, going over some resources that are available on the web for smartphone and tablet apps, and then more specifically on Facebook. Okay, I'll show you the Facebook group that I've created, what my students do on that, and how you can, if you want to use your own Facebook group to have your students go out and find print, graphical, audio sources, place them within the 6 AP themes, and then argue, discuss, talk about them, agree, disagree, as they would hopefully have to do on the AP Persuasive essay. So again, hoping you all know if you haven't, AP Central is an incredible place for information. You can find course description, planning guides, a teacher community, which I have to confess I was not a member of until last month. That's not but there's lots of good information on sharing the teacher community boards there. For response questions, where you'll find examples of, when you find these questions for the last 2 years, you'll find student examples of last year's as well and commentaries. And then the ones for this year normally come up in August or September. So if there will be questions for the current year, the prompts, as well as the audio and the reading, and then the actual student samples will be available normally at the end of the summer, beginning of the school year, so you can look at. Here's an example of a high, a 4 or 5. Here's a mid, 3, going 3, 2, 1, or 0, and why. And part of our job, especially because it's sort of explaining why this would, according to the grading scoring guidelines, we'll talk about that, which I give you a copy. The big thing about the language and culture exams is that it provides students opportunities to demonstrate their proficiencies in the 3 modes of the pre-advanced range, and it is meant to be authentic. When communicating, students in the AP French language and culture course demonstrate an understanding of the cultures, incorporate interdisciplinary topics connections, making comparisons between the native language and the target language, between cultures, comparisons, and use the target language in real life settings. Biggest change from the legacy of the former exam is doing tasks, trying to make them as realistic, real life as possible. As well as the integration, that's why you often have speaking and listening, or you have presentation and personal. So you can make sure that we only have to read something or react to it or listen to it and then write something about it or react to it. So we often have these hybrid real life tasks. The exam tries to present the task and the information within 6 themes. These 6 themes are the same for all languages. They're the same themes in French, in Italian, and in German, and starting this year in Spanish language. They're slightly different themes for Spanish literature, but in all the languages are the same. Esthétique, aesthetics, les défis mondiaux, global challenges, la vie contemporaine, contemporary life, la quête de soi, which in English is personal and public identities, la famille et la communauté, family and community, la science et la technologie. And this is one of the things that I do on the Facebook group is I have the students, when they post and share articles, they have to place it in one of these 6 themes and explain why. These themes often overlap, so they could be in many of them, but sort of as a critical thinking exercise and for persuasive essay exercise, they have to say this falls under this theme because, and justify it. It could be one of 4 or 5 things, but I want them to think why they've chosen one over the others. And one of the things those students can do is challenge that placement and say, no, I believe this belongs more under the if you won't go, then I get this swallow, that's else to take no issue. Because it's a way of getting them to start discussing, presenting an opinion, and defending an opinion. And on the AP language and culture exams, there are 2 parts. There's a multiple choice section, which is worth 50%, that has interpretive print only reading, then combination of reading and listening, and then ending with listening only. There are, I believe, 65 questions on that, but end up being worth about half the exam. Then the free response, where there are the 4 tasks: the email reply, the presentational writing persuasive essay, which cannot be question leader, the interpersonal speaking or conversation, and then the cultural comparison, speaking activity for which Brian is also a question leader, is also leader. And all these have equal weight. So they're all worth 1/4 of that, 50% or 12.5%. For the persuasive essay, the students must write a persuasive essay on a given topic, clearly indicating their own viewpoint and defending it thoroughly. The essay is based on 3 sources: a printed article, a printed graph chart or map, and an audio source, like an interview or podcast. The students have 6 minutes to read the print sources, on the graph, and 6 minutes to hear the audio, which is played twice. Then they have 40 minutes to write an essay. So this year, the persuasive essay topic was in the termes des défis mondiaux, faut-il arrêter de manger de la viande et devenir végétarien pour être en bonne santé? So to prepare for that, the students were given a textual prompt, a reading prompt, faut-il arrêter la viande, which for the most part was in favor of continuing to eat meat, that there were advantages to vegetarianism, but it did mention that eliminating red meat entirely could pose some dangers to the diet. So this would be sort of against stopping eating meat. And as Rich mentioned, often the print and the audio will represent opposite sides of the argument, or will represent opposite sides of the argument. So the print is pro, the audio is con, and vice versa. And then the graphical chart element is often neutral, or have elements of both for them to decipher or interpret. So source 2, you had l'approximation de la borne mondiale en 2007, which shows the kilogram par habitant, how many kilos per inhabitant per year, 8 in France from the years of 1996 to 2007. And then there was an interview with Olivier Raffin, who started the Association Manger Végétarien, which was urging in favor of eating vegetarian. I was going to play the audio source, but unfortunately the sound is good to hear, it's a little hard to hear as opposed to the other. But again, all this is available on AP Central. See what an idea there will be a text, when to read, a graph chart, map for them to interpret, and a podcast interview of 2 to 3 minutes for them to listen to. And in their persuasive essay, they are to, again, state their own opinion, but they are to cite all 3 sources. They only need 1 critical bit of information. And preferably this should be in service of their own argument, defending their own position. So on the rubric, the scoring guidelines, which I've given you a copy, and to get a 5, students need to have effective treatment of the topic, show high degree of comprehension of the sources, integrates content of all 3 sources. The big idea here, integrate. They use the sources in defense of their own argument, as opposed to, we'll see in the 4, they merely summarize. They present and defend their own viewpoint on the topic with a high degree of clarity. They develop a persuasive argument. Their essay is highly organized, use of transitional elements in paragraphs, accuracy, variety, and grammar. And hopefully you'll note there's sort of a parallel between the bullets on these, where it moves from effective to generally effective, from demonstrates high degree of comprehension to afford comprehension, integrates and summarizes. So there's an attempt to sort of show a sort of a scale of progression from one level to the next. Then for 4, a generally effective treatment of the topic, comprehension of the sources, summarizes with limited integration content from all 3 sources, presents and defends the student's own viewpoint, develops a persuasive argument, organized with some effective use of transitional elements, varied and generally appropriate vocabulary. 3, fair, suitable treatment on the topic, demonstrates a moderate degree of comprehension, summarizes content from at least 2 sources. Again, these changes there maybe only be 2 as opposed to 3. Some organization, limited use of transitional elements, generally understandable. And again, here the big thing is they basically did the task. They did what they were asked 2, weak performance, unsuitable treatment of the topic, low degree of comprehension, summarizes content from 1 or 2 sources, the student presents or suggests. So his or her own viewpoint, hard to tell. Often as a question that we're training people, I often talk about my shoulders and how much work I have to do, or we as readers have to do, as opposed to the students. And the 3 or 4, you don't have to do the work. They present the viewpoint. We see it and find it. Here are the sources. In terms of their language, it's generally understandable. It's something that is French and that can be understood by most French speakers with little or no contact with English speakers. Unfortunately, we as French teachers have developed this wonderful ability to understand ce qui n'est pas le français. Things that the students give us that we understand, but a French speaker normally would not. Here are the 2 of the 3, we're doing the work. So often, say when reading the essays, I can feel myself in the 3, 4, 5. I'm relaxed, leaning back. Oh, I wish I had a student who wrote like this. While the 2 and the 1, I feel my shoulders essentially over. What is going on? And I've got to interpret and dig and find things. So then I'm doing the work as opposed to the student doing the work in 3 or 4. And then the 1, poor performance, almost no treatment of the topic, demonstrates poor comprehension of the sources, mostly repeat statements from the sources, or may not refer to any sources at all, minimally suggest the student's viewpoint. Now again, a big difference on the new exam from the legacy of the previous exam is this is very task-oriented. As we like to say, the first few bullets sort of address, does the student accomplish the task? Does the student present his or her own viewpoint? And cite all resources in defending it. And then the other bullets on language organization covers is how well do they present their viewpoint, citing the sources and defending it. So do they accomplish the task? How well do they do it? Now, it is meant to be, again, holistic, so we're not counting points. As I say, we're doing scoring, not grading. Don't think that I'm not testing, we'll talk about clicks. It's meant to be taken holistically. The grading scale is meant to be progressive. As we said, it changes from a high end, integrates to, next to that, summarizing to barely addressing. And there are multiple ways for students to accomplish the task. That all 5s are not alike, all 3s are not alike. They can be 3s, 4s, or 5s for different reasons, different approaches. Again, when reading, it's like, are my shoulders relaxed or are they hunched over? So it's sort of holistically, when reading, it's sort of like, instead of talking about my head, I often talk about my shoulders, because with the essays we're reading, I can often tell if I'm moving in towards the essay, it's probably bad. If I'm leaning back, it's probably good. So you can expect to be holistic. So if they accomplish the task, and then, oh well. So instead of Alan's gut, it's Alan's shoulders. If I'm reading like this, it's probably not a good sign. So any questions on the task? Because some of the important thing was, again, the why do this. I realize my students have to be able to read college level, authentic French resources in print and in audio. So that means not only do I have to give them practice using it, I've got to, or somebody's got to find this stuff to allow them to practice to do it. So again, suggestions how do you do this? Number 1, need to do this from day 1. I teach 3 to 4 credits maybe for French. I actually have 5 credits next year. I have French 1, honors French 3, honors French 4, regular 4, AP. So, but I try to do this as much as possible from day 1. And particularly students that have iPhones or Droid phones, there are lots of apps on social media that have French news, print as well as audio. I suggest they put them on their phone and they just occasionally once a week look at them, see what can you recognize. Some of them, if they're into biking, maybe get a Tour de France, or many of them are into basketball. So last year with Tony Parker and the Spurs, we had lots of things on basketball. You'll find things on, so see later, they were fascinated with the Persuasive swabs. I never knew, I'm almost 50 years old, I never knew the French word for swab before, but I found students that found a scientific article on the Persuasive and their habits, and they were fascinated by this. But they find things that they're interested in. They find vocabulary. They do the work, they don't have to. If it's something for preparing the authentic resources, doing it from day one. I often look at some of my colleagues, it's like first year is too early. No, it's the right time to get them used to it. Get them used to the fact they won't understand everything. Make them happy about the fact that they can understand techniques and recognize things, and then build on that. Particularly with the persuasive essay, it's about a big picture. They don't have to understand everything. They need to get one main point, at least not a big source. If they get 2 or 3 to make it more complex, more elaborate, great. But overall, they need to identify one main idea to incorporate, integrate into their argument. So we start that from day one. What's the big picture? What is this interview about? What's this article about? Then look for detail afterwards. And move up from first year, second, third, fourth, fifth. The go home tour as well as I found to be very helpful preparing that briefing. As our school vendors or stickers, we have all of our students take it every year because, particularly listening to podcasts, so I can level 3s, 4, and 5 is very good practice for it. And the students, they complain about it in March, but the AP students are really happy about it in May that they've had that practice. And as well, practice tests. If you are an AP teacher, you've gone through the AP audit, you have practice tests that are available through the AP site. So then, resources. As I mentioned on my website, I created, largely so I wouldn't forget, I created a website that sort of became my folder or my drawer where I find websites. I would just create a website so I can find them later instead of just having them in my browser and then my students go there. Many media sites have their own websites as well as, besides having websites, they have apps that are available for Android, for iPhones, as well as Facebook pages or Facebook groups. So I've created and organized this whenever I find these photos here for my students to access so that if they have an iPhone or Android, they can go there and subscribe. A couple that I'm talking about that I use for active home, obviously, very good. I think it's on Table also has a little app for Flash, where if you download the app, it has a 2-minute flash, which I found very good, particularly with lower level students, which is little 2-minute news briefs. They may not understand 2 or 3, but 1 or 2 maybe big world news events they probably don't know something about. And again, just play it quickly in class or something. What were these stories about? There were 4 stories. What were the 4 about? First year, maybe they only recognize 1 or 2, but if you do this enough and get the book out of their nose where they'll understand it, like, well, okay, I understood 2 of the stories, 3 or 4. It's the iPhone and the Android app for, I think it's Take a Second Home. And then once you're in Take a Second Home, it has several options, and one of them I think is Apple and Flash. And then it downloads little 2-minute videos of news items for the day.
It is fabulous. It's got little news segments, and it's divided into beginner, intermediate, and advanced levels. So you can do the same clip with 3 different level classes, and they can either do this online and email it to you, or you can do it in class. It's wonderful for oral company.
You don't use like in our school, they don't want you don't want the Facebook or any of that. I'm trying to figure out a way to bypass.
You just go online, put it up on the screen. They can listen to it. They all listen to it through the air, and then you can print out the worksheet, and you can do that. You do it together, and then you do the groups. It's fabulous. Very
Okay,
much.
double that again. If you doesn't know the app, you go just to the website, turn off and look for an app for Flash, and then go directly off of that. For this, I've done a lot more on mobile application because even in my school, they don't allow students to use Facebook on the school computers. Now, they all do it on their own phones, in the hallways or in the bathrooms or lunchtime anyway on their own. So that's why I sort of leverage this, where they're much less likely to go onto a computer and log out of the site and look at it. Whether they got it in their phone, they're probably more likely to look at a 2-minute video on the cell phone and do that anyway while they're getting ready for practice or waiting for the bus or sitting around doing nothing, as opposed website. So on the head, if you go to the wall,
Should I go to where Andy looked out open for us? Is it looked out?
so on the hand, at the very top of the handout that I gave you, it has my website, faculty.ignatius.edu/Turner. And then once you're at that site, there's a navigation bar on the left and go from home to AP French Language and Culture, or technically it's faculty.ignatius.edu/Turner/AP French Lang. So that's why,
And that's open.
yes, and that's why I gave you all this sense of, if you find it, if you don't have any help, you can access it.
So how often are they on coffee shop?
Once a week, and the APs, they're doing it twice a week. So I'll get to the habit of it. I have all my third year and above students doing it. First year, I don't think they know enough, but my third, fourth, and AP students, it's a regular weekly quiz or weekly requirement where they have to either post or comment on another student's post once a week. And then for my APs, in the second semester, they have to do it twice a week. So they have to post something of their own, and they have to go back and comment on somebody else's post every week. And I give them a 10-point quiz, like 10 out of 10 if they did a good job. It was mostly French, 9 out of 10 if it was good, but they screwed up. Like most often, they don't use the subjunctive well. That's trouble that it's using the subjunctive is often one of the key aspects. There are 8 if it's understandable, but bad, or if they forget to put it in an AP theme. Or some of them create a 7th or 8th or 9th or 10th AP theme. That's not one of the 6 official themes.
I love the thing, and then, okay. There's a way, good job.
Watch it. Go to that column where sort of why is that a team?
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Do you have, like this summer, I'm having my incoming AP students do a vlog, and, oh, we're doing one summertime. It's just like, they have to post something every 2 weeks. So actually, this weekend is coming up with one of our assignments. And I have like a 300-word minimum, because otherwise they just, oh, you should do a fini si tu super, like that. How do you, like, what kind of guidelines do you have for, like, how long and detailed it should be?
I don't. And I don't know if I give them a 10-point quiz. If they give me like such a suggested crew jumps up and they get 7 out of 10,
Yeah.
which in our school becomes a D, about the lowest passing D. They get a couple of 7s. I get a lot longer, more involved, more accurate responses. So before I translate, it needs to be this one, and students have to get way too into that, and I get a lot of crap that's not just, I want something good. I tell them that the idea is they're supposed to prove to me that they've actually read or listened to the video, that they've read the article or listened to the video. So I don't want plagiarism, and I don't want Google Translate. So again, select an article, place it in there, and find the one big idea, and place it under a theme and walk. And then when they're commenting, to the other students, they're to elaborate, mention additional information, or discuss their life, which I'll show you. We'll take you to that sort of examples, what they do and how they do them. But largely, I want them to practice the AP type activities. Find authentic resources or authentic videos. Identify the main point. Do you agree or disagree with it? Your opponent, your opinion, those sorts of things. And then other students to comment, they agree or disagree.
Yes, did you say that you ask students to get a separate identity on Facebook?
No.
You don't, they put it on their regular Facebook account?
Yes.
And then the teacher would get a separate identity to, or
No.
it doesn't matter?
No,
You do-
I created a Facebook group. So the students, as she'll be signed up for a group. I don't have to be friends with them. They aren't friends with me. They sign up to the group. And they, in the group, and there's the different settings, I have the group open so that everybody can see it, but only members can subscribe to it. It's open, they're secret, they're closed. But I have the group now, it's open, so anybody in the world can go to it and see it. You can go and look at it, see what students are doing. But they have to ask to be a member of the group, and I'm the one who approves. When I let my students in, and I'll talk about that at the end why I went back and forth as to whether I was going to open it or not. I eventually decided just to keep it in my own students because it's kind of a little too big with 4 classes. If I had other students in other schools, it would be a little too hard for me to search and keep track of what students are doing. But parents can go and see what's going on, but only members of the group can post. And the reason I wanted them to keep their own identities and not create another is that by joining the group, and once they like the pages or groups that are on here, news articles automatically show up in news feeds. So they don't have to go looking for the audio or the video or the articles. They come to them whenever they log on Facebook, like anything else. encouraging what they're already doing. Once they log into Facebook, in addition to seeing their favorite bands or their favorite foods, they'll see French coming at them.
How do you separate it by levels?
I don't.
Oh, so how do they know which one they should?
They don't, I don't care. And particularly if the honors 3 students are going to be taking AP, but my honors 3 last year will be an AP this year, so they'll just keep doing what they've been doing. And sometimes it becomes a little competition thing where I want sometimes the seniors to smack down some of the juniors when they make mistakes and the juniors to show off. It's French is French. At that point in level 3, it's any student can come in and anybody else's. I take a little bit into consideration that the 4s will probably do better than the 3s, but there's a little healthy competition in that sometimes.
Sorry, I have a basic question. Do they have to change the language of their Facebook to French?
No.
Do we all have to change that? Okay, do they have to change the language of their phone to French to comment
No.
effectively?
And when I don't count accents to make it easier for them. If they're on a computer, I don't count accents. I just tell them to type. Don't worry about the accents. If you want to, fine. Although from tablets and phones, it's a lot easier, but where they can just press and hold it, and the accents are easier. But I don't hold them accountable for accents because it can be a bit of a pain. I just
Okay,
want
so
to-
all languages, American English, it's all in English.
Right, they keep the settings for everything else, and they just type in the box in French. They can if they want to, but I've done it, but I find it awkward, and I feel
You
sad.
don't want the accents to get in the way. You want them to be able to interact with the French and express their opinion and smack people down or whatever. But it's in French, because this is the actual community using it in real.
And what's fun is we sort of have the same issue in our school where we have multiple networks in our school where students can't access Facebook on the student network. We as faculty can. So sometimes once a week or once every couple of weeks, I'll connect my computer or laptop to the faculty network and connect it to the smart board and show them what they've written and say, well, this is good, this is bad, and sometimes happen. Hey, you guys put in the accents. Just sort of, and that's also a review where I can show off, okay, this is a 2-word response. This is not acceptable. I don't want to see this anymore. So also shaming, also this is a board giving some encouragement. This was a wonderful response. I want to see more like Owens and like Billy. This is really not. So I want to see something much better next week. And so we said, hey, you guys, what should have been? Where are the accents? What are mistakes that you saw here? What are corrections that you made? And after a couple of weeks, they get to be very good at recognizing the mistakes. They may not always know what the right thing is, but they know where the mistakes are. So again, my Facebook, originally when I was going to do this, we have a learning management system, Haiku in our school. And originally I was going to set up a way for the students to interact on Haiku through a discussion board. But the students hate Haiku. I'm a bit of a tech geek as well. I have my master's degree in educational technology, and I hate Haiku. I find it a major pain in my behind as well. But figured, well, if I can get the students, perhaps get on it, cut and paste articles, and even the students have done that's too much work. If they're cutting and pasting, we'll probably screw up, put the wrong things on there. So there's something easier. So we also use Google for our email and Google Docs for our students, but our student blocks, Google Plus. I thought, well, that might be an option because many of the websites have Google Plus as well as Facebook. And the students say, oh, okay, maybe. It's like, well, how about if I set up my own blog? Would you guys be interested in that? And by that time, they're like, Mr. Turner, why don't you just do it on Facebook? We're all on anyway. Oh, okay. So then I went and looked how to set up a group, which is relatively easy. I got those settings and found out since they're there anyway, and you want me doing something else, why not set up something with already on? And where if they find articles, either the articles come to them, or if they're looking someplace on the web, there's that little share button, the little Facebook app where they can automatically, instead of sharing it onto their own timeline, they can have an option to group, and they type in AP French 9, and they can share it directly to our group. So that's what I learned from the students, like, yeah, why am I doing all this extra work you guys are doing? And I've discovered the last year and a half that I've done this, normally there are 2 or 3 students that don't already have Facebook accounts, and so I asked them to create them, and they haven't had a problem with it, and they do it. And the parents haven't had a problem with it because when we're back to school, I can show them what we're doing and why, and explain, well, as an AP question leader, this is for authentic resources. And I wasn't a big social media fan, I'm kind of antisocial, but it's, for this usage it took me, this is something that I found to be effective, and a little thing any students who get something out of it. Their scores this year seem to have shown that they are getting a little something out of it. So why Facebook? They're already on it. 2, multiple platforms that they don't have to just access it through a computer like they have to do through our high learning management system or some others. They can access it through smartphones, through tablets, iPhones, Kindles, Nooks. It also supports audio and video very well, since part of the idea of this, I want them to not only find text, that's another thing that we're reading. If I see 2 or 3 weeks in a row, they're only selecting and sharing audio, then I start dropping them and say they should alternate. You find text 1 week, sharing audio the next week. And that's been the biggest struggle, and that's where a lot of our students get 8s. It's like you just keep finding. Because it is easy and there's a lot of it. And it's also easier for them to perhaps just cut and paste as opposed to actually sitting there listening to the video. But after a couple of weeks of giving 7 and 8s, they realize what the points and actually have to listen to the videos. Which again, on some of the other stuff, which some of the other blogging devices or Haiku just does not deal with audio video curriculum at all. At least in Facebook, half the time you can see the little video right there and click on it without having to go to another page. And students can like articles that show up in the news feeds, which I'll show as I set them up. And I do in the summer, I go and select many of these media outlets that I want them to use, and I share them onto the page. So the first thing they'll see in the fall is a series of 15 or 20 of these sites, and then they're to go to that page and like it. I have to explain a little bit to me. To actually go to the page and like that page, not like the fact that I posted it. And then all of the video and media will come to them in their news feeds. Again, they don't have to go hunting for the articles and the audio and video gets pushed to them. And if the students find articles on their own, again, as I said, many sites have a Facebook link for sharing, so they're just making it easier for the students because they love finding excuses why not to do it. This eliminates 90% of the excuses why not to do it. So, now for me, why? To the what. All right. Facebook.
Excuse me. Do you review before an article is put on there by a student?
No.
Do you just trust them?
They post the articles. I normally go through once a week and check and see what they've done.
Okay.
If something that's really inappropriate, I can go through and delete it. Once you create a group, you as the creator become the moderator. If you want to, you can create other moderators, but I don't. My colleague, if my colleague and other teacher was going to do that, I can make them a moderator, they can delete. But I go through and check once a week what they do and give them their points, and that's why I decide what's appropriate or not.
So you just give guidelines at the beginning and then you trust them with...
Yeah, and then if they don't, if I delete something, I give them a 0.
I see what you mean, yeah.
So if if they post something that's really inappropriate, then I have to delete it, then it becomes a 0. And, we don't do that.
Okay.
Yeah, I can. I normally do that every year. So there's a section in here where you go into members and you can edit them. And normally at the end of the year, I deleted last year's seniors, so I normally keep students out for about a year. But if a student does transfer to another school, I can't take them off. I've actually had one transfer student that liked it and stayed on it and did it in his other schools. So I do that about a year later. So this year, seniors, I may keep on something like to continue to count with the others. It's really a year after they left. I go through this summer and I deleted the class of 2012. When I first started it, the next year I'll delete the class of 2013. You can at any time go in and add and delete any student at any time if you want. I just found I was actually surprised that graduating seniors will still sometimes go on and comment and do things, which some of the underclassmen find fun or interesting. But you have control, you can delete right at any time. So here's the group that I've created, which I call AP French Language and Culture, or AP French Lang, on Facebook. And what I do for the summer to start it up is I've taken many of these sites that I've liked and shared them on so that the students can go and click on them and then like them. What I mean by like is that they should actually click on the link for it to show up, and then go from here and then select light, so that now anything that this company puts on their site gets pushed into their newsfeed. Unfortunately, sometimes students, when I put it there, they thought like meant that they were to click on the like button here, that the like that I shared it. No, that doesn't do anything. I don't know what I mean. So at the beginning, I give them a list of many different sites so that they can go and select. I actually suggest they go and select and like all of them to get as many as possible, and select at least a few audio, video, so that everything gets pushed to them. And then I also have on the group a file, which I added in the about, but then I also added a file later that gives a description of where I list the 6 names for them, and also finally go back so that the idea is that they are to select once a week a text or video and place it in one of the 6 AP themes and explain why. And then the alternate week, the next week, they're to go back, read what the others have posted, and comment. I learned whether they agree with what they need to do with the persuasive essay, with an opinion, and then agreeing, disagreeing, contesting information. Okay. Do you have a question?
So once a week, they're doing 2 things, they're posting and commenting on someone else, or is it every other week?
My AP students are doing that. I have my regular, I have all my 3rd year and all my 4th year and AP students doing this. All of them, once a week, they do one thing. They either post or they comment on someone else. My AP students, I have them do it twice a week and the 2nd semester in preparation for the AP exam. So I think that's a bit overkill for some of the other students where it's, they do it, and I've noticed throughout the year, they tended to get longer as the year went on. This was from, towards the end of the year, different protests, but they'll select an article, place it in, and then students will make comments on it. So this is one of the things I found interesting. Very early on in the year, so back in September, which was for Costa Rica, Centre Européen des Imaginables, and I'm damn near 50 years old, I never used the word sloth, I knew the word sloth in French, but these students found it and commented like crazy. If I picked an article on sloth, they looked at me, Turner, what are you drinking? What is wrong with you? They pick it, they think it's the coolest thing in the world.
Look at how they respond to that article.
And that's one of the things, I'm giving them choice. Instead of me choosing what's of interest, they find what's of interest to themselves. So they're more likely to be animated to talk about it, and they're more likely to remember and use the vocabulary of something they're interested in. So rather than me finding and forcing the articles, they find it, they comment on it, and it's amazing what they find interesting about it.
I love this. May I ask, what is your grading rubric for this? Is it just how many long on, or?
No, and remember first is whether they do something once a week or not. So normally I grade 8, 9, or 10 every week. So if they put something, and it's really bad French, but at least they post something and they identify it within one of the official 6 names, it's normally an 8. Unless it's plagiarized or just vulgar and inappropriate. So it's 8, it's normally crappy, but they try to do it. 9, they did something, there may be some major grammatical mistakes, and then 10 overall is pretty good. And I'm not looking for perfection, it's kind of like the AP 3, 4, 5. So like 8 is sort of fair, they did it, and it's something that's understandable as French. 9, they did it. There are some inaccuracies, some problems, but it's a good job. And then 10, strong.
How do you correct it, or do you correct it?
I don't correct it. I normally will show it in class once a week or once every other week. A little more at the beginning of the year, and then less at the end of the year. We'll project it in class and go through and show some of the ones I found more interesting or more problematic. And
But you don't correct like individually each one and tell them in class.
No. They'll get a grade for that at the end of the week. So if, again, if something is really bad and I give it a 7 or an 8, then the student say, well, why did I get that? Then I may go back and show them, and they're
Okay,
not
almost like
likely.
every, okay.
again, it's sort of holistic, I think, grading scale, where I go through and read
Right,
them.
instead of having each, yeah.
Where it's always, did they accomplish the task? Did they prove to me that they understood? Because sometimes they will write something that has nothing to do with the article that they liked. Or it's just obviously plagiarized or copied, or the worst is Google Translate. So they have to prove to me they've actually read or listened to the audio or video, placed it within a context, and identified the big idea. And then if they're commenting on somebody else's, again, they have to prove to me they've read the original article, and then a big idea is something they used to agree or disagree. What have they added, as opposed to just repeating, recycling? What have they added?
And they supply the link that's on it, so then the next week, if I go, and I think you probably find very interesting articles, like you, my classmate. So I would go to your link and then I would read it as well, or I just comment on your, I go to the article you've chosen and commented on.
Right, but
And
it's,
then I read it myself and then I comment.
right.
Okay.
So in this case, where Billy commented they should then follow that link, it's probably not available now since it's election. Oh, no, this was good. So then they would go and read the article, and then they would go back onto Facebook and write a comment.
Kids do this. This is what they do. They do this every day, all day, all night. They see something that one of their friends has posted, and they go, oh, and so it's, oh, and so this is exactly what they do. They're doing it in French, and it's right now, and it's things that they're interested in.
And it's constructive, and it's not sexy.
And it's authentic.
Yes.
And it's not me finding all this stuff. They're doing those. And there are things that they will, there are sometimes articles that they'll bring up that I will then use for the class or for different classes where it's, again, I'm a bit of a geek and I'm reading and listening to these things anyway, all the time anyway, but there are some articles that they presented that I've used in class and used in abbreviated form for other, for first year or levels where it's like, wow, I hadn't seen it.
Yeah, so no.
And then as well for cultural comparison, one of the things I like is well using it for the differences between what they see from one culture over the next. Differences in how news items are reported or what they find and when they're not important or how they react. So then going back to it, some of the things, which I've also found the last couple of years, like the cultural comparison and the persuasive, my students seem to do very well on both, with sort of the same types of activities I try and teach them together with a lot of the comparisons and what they need to do for both. And these skills seem to transfer fairly well. And I try to explicitly at the beginning point out, and I also try to encourage them, don't just find France, use Canada, try to find some North Africa, West Africa. And that's why I try to look for some of the differences. And I also try to say, after starting them off just the big ideas, they go from the big ideas, well, what do you see sort of culturally that's different? What's a different view? Because a lot of them will want to identify things like basketball or American politics, which this past year with the election of the American president, okay, that made sense. But I just don't want repetitions. I want you to find something that you didn't see in the American press, or a perception or a comment of something you found interesting or odd or different. How are they commented about it differently than you might have seen on the American news media?
As far as classifying these by theme, there's no place to put this by theme, so they would just say, this belongs to.
Right. C'est un type de sous or I'll say, it's a type puisqu'il s'agit de.
Right.
So that's why I normally will put a couple of articles at the beginning of the year, showing this. Well, now they can also look and see what others have done, but I know we're something c'est un type de sous-scène tout le thème de la science et de la technologie puisqu'il s'agit des paresseux des années nouveaux Costa Rica. So we don't choose something and then justify why, and prove it to me that you read more than the headline. And again, this was from a very good student. So in September, most of them were only about a couple of lines long, would normally end here. You see, this was a better student who went farther, but almost all the students by the end of the year were doing that. So I can see a progression from almost all the students going from 1 to 2 sentences to full paragraphs. And again, when there's things that they like, and I teach them in all the way school, boys love to argue. So giving them an argument, giving them a way to discuss it. Yes.
Sunshine?
I actually think it's Bill, and it's really funny. Instead of using his first name, he signed up as Sunshine. It's really fun. He's always smiling, and he's got a bright red hair, so it's
And so 68 boys love sloths.
to 10. Something like that is when I would go below the 8, and I would do a 6 or 7 to get their attention and say, no, this is unacceptable, and it normally doesn't repeat.
How do you report the grade to them? Do you,
We have an online,
so you just put it on the online grade?
right, we use Blackboard, so I just put it, I set up a weekly, it's a weekly quiz grade, it's a standing quiz grade, so every week they have their AP posting, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever week it is, and they get a 8, 9, or 10 out of 10.
So I have a clarification of technicality of this exercise. So each of your students needs to put one article every week? Or
They either place an article or
comment. Oh, I see.
unless they're the AP students. The AP students, the second semester, they have to do both. Every other student does either or. And I normally sort of alternate at the beginning of the year, so I divide the class in half and say this group has to do this by Labor Day, and then the other group has to comment or the other, then they should alternate. They should do one thing each week, either posting or commenting. And after the first couple of weeks, I don't remember who does what. I'm just looking normally to see one who did it. And then secondly, I'm trying to make sure there's enough video, because a lot of times the students don't select audio or video, so then by the 3rd, 4th week, I'm really nailing. We need to have more video audio sources. We need to practice the listening.
You often have that it's just one article and everybody comments on this particular article. So in that case, you could carry on the others usually at least a little bit of the classroom too, like asking questions to make sure that they
Some, but I'm okay with that, as long as if they find, like this law, if they find one thing more interesting than another, I don't care.
Yeah, I understand this.
And if there's something that I really find interesting, then I'm going to bring it up in class and make everybody really listen to it. But it's,
don't post your article yourself?
I do occasionally, if there's something I find really interesting, or I do at the beginning of the year to give them a couple of examples, models, but it's, I normally stay out of it after. Like, there are a couple of things that particularly I'll tend to post infography, because I normally don't, that's hard for them to find, so occasionally someone will do that. Third type, if I find an interesting chart or infography or map, I may post something like that because it's hard for them to find and to interpret. But normally after they get started, after the first 2, 3 weeks, I stay out and play referee.
Does that mean you go and read and listen to all those audio and articles? Oh,
A lot of them.
a lot of them? If I do the math, that's a lot.
Kind of as we have at our school, we have a preparation period, and so a lot of times it's sort of like once a week, that's my prep period where I would go through, mostly grading other tests, so things like go through and we'll read and listen. And unfortunately, I'm a bit of a techie guy, often will be reading. I have a lot of these apps on my phone, and so a lot of these articles will come through my news feeds, and I would read and see anyway. So about half of them I'm probably reading on my own, and some others I have installed, and I'll go and follow the links to look at them. Don't necessarily read all of them, some of me skim. Some of them I'm looking to see whether they plagiarized or not, if they really did use the right words. But as I try to, for my own sake, which is one of the reasons when the second show when I set it up, I try to leave it, I've left it a group where I only accept students from my own school, because I try to keep it where I can manage this 45 minutes a week, or one of my prep periods a week, I'll go through, see the people and assign the scores, and if I had it open to other teachers or other schools, which we talked about with a couple of colleagues at other schools doing, it would have been manageable. So I'm trying to make sure I can bring all this.
Easy enough to do it instead of their own.
Right. Which, so segue two, to set up your own group. If you're on Facebook, the left-hand side, after you have sort of favorites and the groups, if you're a member of the groups, it'll show groups there or not. There's an icon for create group. And so to create a group, you would give it a name, such as I call mine a French language, because nobody else had it, but you can call it Mr. So-and-so, Madame, class, or whatever you like. Then you have to add at least one member. So when I first set it up, I asked one of my Spanish colleagues who was going to do that. It was on Facebook. So I chose another adult, another teacher to set it up. I was going to try. Friendly, I don't recommend friendly students or others. It's problems with it. It's normally having another teacher or colleague or spouse, or someone that you're a friend with on Facebook, add them as another member to get the group up and going so the page appears. Then you have 3 options: open, closed, or secret. By default, it's closed, where anyone can see the group and who's in it, but only members see the post. That's how I set it up originally. I don't like that because I want parents to see what's going on, or anybody, or administrators or somebody else. So I have mine as open, so anybody can see the group, who's in it, and what the members post.
But the only people that, oh.
But the only people that can post are the members, and I control, as the admin, when you start it up, you control who's a member. They have to go to the page, request to be a member, and you accept, or deny, or ignore.
Do you need an email address for the members, is that how you? or just-
No, the members, once you create the page, once they go to the page, there's a little button, like most things will have like that says request to be a member.
They send a friend request, and then you okay.
It's like a friend request.
Right.
It's like a friend.
Yes, it's the same.
So once you create the group name, you can just sort of go on Facebook and look for the student name, as long as you got it as closed or open.
Now the members can't add other people.
No, the members, unless you can let them do that, I know we recommend not.
You don't have to find your students.
No, you do not have to make right.
So you have it so everyone can see it, but only members can post.
Right.
So it's not open.
No, mine is open.
That's just an example.
This is the when you
You
first.
said you don't, it says you said. They said, that's all.
Right, that's the default. When you first go to create a group, the default is on closed. I would recommend making it open. Because I just find it weird, it's like, my French teacher wanted me to go to this group and then my parents can't see what's going on. Which is also where I didn't know my secret. Only members can see the group and who's in it, member, like, no. Like, my French teacher invited me to a secret group on Facebook. Transparency. So anybody can see what's there. And also I sort of administrators, colleagues, like, hey, here's this group, so my students going, take a look at this, take a look. Students are actually doing some things. There's actually maybe some use for technology.
This is what we did with our French trip to the gym. One of the kids created a Facebook page, and so we can all put pictures on there, and all the parents can see all the pictures, you know, but only we, the members, can put pictures on there. No, everybody can comment, but only we can put the pictures.
Well, just curious, do you get school or parents' permission before you start this, or you just?
Well, and a private school, I have at the beginning of the year, I have a form where I have the students sign off at the beginning of the year, where I give them guidelines. I ask for their permission to videotape them for any projects and things like that. I videotape every single oral activity that they do and put it on an e-portfolio. We have through our iCool LMS, and the same thing with this. So I sort of add this into this thing that I have them do anyway. So nobody said no, because most of them actually kind of they like being able to see what their students are doing. They actually are doing some work in their French classes, where they can go and see after the enroll. They can see that afternoon or the next morning how well they did or how poorly they did, or they can see whether their son is hosting here. Because a lot of them do this. It is pretty much easy points if they follow directions and do it. It's most of them get a 9 out of.
The tricky thing though, what if you have, like you said, you don't have all of them, what if you had a student that had something in there that was inappropriate, you don't catch that one, then what happened? Then months goes by.
It may take a week to catch. Most of them students love complain about it. Most of them will start commenting on it or bring it up and like, oh, this is true. Did you see what John put or something else? It tends to be so weird. But if not, then I say it again, it's, if they do weird, it's.
We kill the child. So this has been inappropriate.
Let's teach us.
No. There have been a couple, and most of the time, once students like to see what they can get away with, or to see, does he actually read these and check it? So when they find that I read it, check it, and delete it, and they get a bad grade, that's awesome.
You guys have a policy.
Well, we, since last year, and we know, we lost 2 teachers in the last 5 years. And because of, technology, but we're not very support. If we go that way, we're pretty much on our own. So if something happened, it's pretty much you can do it, get the parents' permission. But if something happened, we're not behind you. So it's so scary for us as teacher at our school to go, well, I don't get the support administration. We can do it, but if something happened, then you're on your own.
Right. So then that might be to look to see if they have something, and again, they have a discussion approach, so I just find this easy. But if you don't have a school support, then should do. I've been fairly lucky where the school has pretty much, again, they can't do it on school premises, they can't use the school network, but they can access it from on their own cell phones. And again, I've added my principal and dean and other colleagues as members and made them members of the group so they can sort of see what's going on. So that's great as well as
But
I
you
provide
teach
them
in
here.
private, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and therein lies the difference, you know, opposed to private school. And of course, I don't think they was, you know, teachers who were sent away or released is probably because they were involved in something they shouldn't have been. But if your student is posting a photo of themselves doing whatever.
Well, yeah, but things would
They were not penalized.
well, there's a case in Reno that's actually going to court because it was taken out of context and changed. Because, you know, I mean, you all know, I mean, kids are taking pictures of us all the time teaching, and things are moved and manipulated. So, no, I mean, I'm totally for this stuff. I love technology, but I'm getting worried these days with all the stuff that they do when they come up, and you never know when they videotaping you, taking picture of the board, and
Which went for this, for the students should be only sharing stories from legitimate French news outlets. Unless it's been posted from a news outlet that has it on there, but for the most part, it's like, if you go and look at your YouTube, no, I'm gonna give you a 0 for it. I want you to use legitimate French news outlets.
did you get the parents involved in that case?
Most of the point, the parents don't. I haven't had a parent complain at all because I've given their son a 1 or a 0 or a 6 or something because they didn't follow directions. The parents are like, why did he get a 6? He didn't follow directions. I asked him to do this, he did this. Oh, okay, thanks.
Well, you get good parents.
Yeah.
But it's also like, we have a back to school.
She doesn't do anything bad, and,
Last of the year, I have the first day of school, I sent home for all the parents a list of expectations of what the students are expected to do and not, and procedures and what goes on this. So once they get it back assigned, if they say, well, I didn't know when you signed this, it said that you did. And I showed it to them back to school night. So they have that first, and I had one parent that asked the students not participate, and I found other things for me to do, and so didn't make a big deal out of it. So I had one parent that had an issue with it, and actually afterwards they had their son participate in the second semester. So, as I said, we're creating a group venue, and there was a link to my group, which feel free to look at if you'd like to, see what the students have done throughout the year. Again, you click create group, give it a name, at least one number, choose privacy, I recommend open, I definitely do not recommend private. And then some considerations, again, membership approval. You, by creating the group, you become the administrator, so you have control over who becomes a member and you can delete members. You can make other people admins if you have a colleague or another teacher. Right now, my French colleague isn't interested in doing that. My Spanish colleague, I could, but she doesn't teach the students, so I'm the only admin, but you can select other teachers if you wanted to, that could be allowed to add members and delete, but other members cannot add other members. They can recommend them, but you still have ultimate control as the admin as to who's part of your group or not. You can create a group address if you want to for sending emails, or I created an AP French line so that if students want to go to it, they can go to groups.facebook.com/AP French line. So you can create a shortcut name through the settings to make it easier for your students to identify. You just put in a name that says if it's available or not, and if it's not, you add or delete characters until you find something you like. I'd also recommend uploading, as I should have a file as well as a description that lists the AP themes, because particularly at the beginning for first-time students, so like, what are the themes again, where do I find them? So I put them right in the group so they can see it, and after a month or so, they get used to it. And then particularly after students from 3rd year to 4th year, they already know, they already have background in it. Posting permissions, posting approval, again, as an admin, students automatically post if you find something inappropriate, you can delete it or change it, so you have control over this. Just because they put it up doesn't mean it's just the admin to delete it, just as on your own wall. Now, after doing this, I set this up originally at the end of the 3rd and 4th quarter of 2012 last year, but my students really didn't have much of a time to participate in it. And then I really set it up for all my students this year. And then the College Board, besides releasing the scores for AP, they also have an instructional planning report that just came out, I think it was Monday, for teachers over this last week. And so I went and looked at my instructional planning report to see how my students did in presentational writing. For example, last year, all of my students were in the lowest and the second, fourth presentational writing, which I took a little personal. Like, I'm the question leader, and my students that really have that. Wow. And then this year, when no one was in the lowest of the world, but 59% the second, fourth, 35, and third, and sixth, the highest. Part of that, I think, is better familiarity with the exam, but I'm also convinced that I think this Facebook group had quite a bit to do with having the students writing better. And then the students that I had doing this current year that are juniors, that will be seniors next year doing that, they don't have 2 years of practice to perhaps get more in there. So it's, I can't say for sure that this is done it, but I think this is one of many factors that has, at least for my students, made their presentation writing better. And then conversely as well, that was when I looked at the cultural comparison, I saw exactly the same jump. For my students, the hardest part is always the conversation. That's the hardest thing, but at least this addresses some of that. But I've seen parallels between this and the cultural comparison that the Facebook groups use as how their critical skills on both, as well as comparing and contrasting, making some critical judgments. So considerations for the group: if your school will allow you to do it, if you feel comfortable doing it, is group size. Again, when I first started, I had some other teachers, colleagues in other schools that wanted to participate, and largely because of numbers, because I had 4 classes with 60, 70 students participating, I decided not to allow them to be part of that, because I would have taken more than that 1 period a week to keep track or say who's my student, who's not my student, what's going on. Which right now I'm enjoying it. It's fun. I find it fun to go through and read what they were doing. If it got much larger, it would become more of a pain and not fun. And it's like, well, it's fun for me and fun for them. So that's something to keep in mind. If you want to invite others or other colleagues, what's large or manageable for you to control? Say the number limits, you decide who wants which classes, if you only want seniors or upper level or lower level, or what. For me, I've decided that first and second year students probably aren't at a level to do it well, but I think third and fourth year, third year and above, I find it the most appropriate. Verification, what I tend to do at the beginning of the year is I said I would go through, read it. At the beginning of the year, I'd go through, click on the like button, and that was the way the students know that I implemented and gave them a grade. So when I would go through at the beginning and have my grade book and would put down, they'd check what the student gave, when I gave them 8, 9, or 10, and then so they would know that they had a grade. I'd click on like for their comment, and then they could go and check and know that I did it. Then after about the first semester, I sort of left the like alone and just they would go and see it. But at the beginning of the year, they like that feedback to get to know that I'm checking on you. This is a requirement. You need to know that you need to do this. So that's one easy way at the beginning, just letting the students know that I am reading these, I am checking on this. It should be appropriate. It should be something you should be proud of, because anybody in the room can see it. It's an open group.
That also, at that point, you could write a nice little statement comment. See.
Right. Exactly. Right. And there always, I can always post a comment as well.
Right.
As well.
Well, you're not like it, huh?
I always thought I was sure I dislike That's all I have. Any other questions? The contact me for something that to whether you have any questions or not, feel free to access my site or the Facebook or as well. I'm on Facebook as well. This is Bill Valentine. Yeah, this is Bill Valentine. Feel free to contact me there as well. Good luck. I hope this helps.
Yeah.